Access to clean water and safe sanitation, it feels, well, fundamental, right?
Absolutely, a basic human right.
And completely essential for health, for dignity, for opportunity, really. It's even one of those big sustainable development goals everyone talks about.
And rightly so. I mean, its impact is just foundational. Think about disease, poverty, education.
Especially for women and girls, yeah, who often have to fetch the water.
Exactly. Without basic water and sanitation, progress in so many other areas is just incredibly difficult.
So we know it's important. But, knowing globally that we need better access is one thing. Understanding where the millions of people still lacking access actually are, that's a much more precise and, well, challenging question.
It really is.
Today we're taking a deep dive into a, frankly, remarkable study that tackles exactly that. It was published in Lancet Global Health.
Yes, I know the one.
And it maps the geographical inequalities in water and sanitation access across low-income and middle-income countries, LMICs.
Right.
Over nearly 2 decades, basically, from 2000 up to 2017.
And crucially, this isn't based on just simple national averages, is it?
Not at all.
No. The core source here is it's a massive research effort. They pulled data from over 600 different sources.
600, wow.
Yeah, things like household surveys, censuses across more than 88 countries.
Okay.
And their goal was to get down to the second administrative level, think districts or maybe subregions in some places.
Right, so much more local.
Exactly. To see access at a much higher resolution than we've really had before for this many places, all at once.
So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack what this incredible level of detail actually reveals. We want to go beyond those headline numbers, beyond the overall progress, to understand where the real wins happen, where the huge, persistent gaps remain hidden.
And what that means for health.
And critically, what this means for the health of vulnerable populations, especially, young children. It's about identifying who's being left behind and where.
So that resources can actually get to where they're needed most.
Precisely. More targeted efforts.
And to get this higher picture, the study had to use standardized definitions, right?
Yeah, they followed the WHO-UNICEF Joint Monitoring Program framework, the JMP.
Okay, so for water, they looked at categories like piped water on or off the premises.
Right, then other improved sources like protected wells, that kind of thing.
And then unimproved sources, and finally surface water, like rivers or lakes.
And for sanitation, was it similar?
Very similar. They categorized it starting with sewer or septic connections, the safest.
Okay.
Then other improved facility, like certain types of latrines. Then unimproved facilities. And finally, open defecation.
And these categories cover everyone, right? Mutually exclusive.
Exactly. Mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Everyone fits into one category, which is key if you want to track progress comprehensively.
So let's start with the big picture then. From 2000 to 2017, across all these LMICs, were things moving in the right direction overall? Was there progress?
Absolutely. And that's, the good news to start with. Nationally, there was significant progress. Access to piped water. The safest level, it increased from around 40% to just over 50%.
So a decent jump.
Yeah. And all improved water sources combined went from about 82, 83% up to 87%.
Okay.
And sanitation.
Similar story. Sewer or septic connections jumped from under 30% to over 46%.
Wow, quite a big leap there.
It is. And overall improved sanitation rose from 60% to nearly 76%. So yes, the overall trend, looking nationally, was definitely positive.
Okay, but let's unpack this. Because you said nationally, and while those numbers sound encouraging, this study's high-resolution data must reveal a much more complex story underneath.
That's exactly it. This is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, quite sobering.
Right.
The big takeaway from getting down to that local level is just how vast and persistent the geographical inequalities are within these countries.
So the national average hides a lot.
It can be incredibly misleading. It hides huge disparities between regions, between urban and rural areas, or sometimes even just between neighboring districts. And the study gives some really striking examples of this, doesn't it? Where you might hear a city has, say, really high access, over 80 or 90%.
Wow.
And you'd think, okay, problem solved there. But this data shows something else.
It shows that even in those high percentage areas, a massive, absolute number of people can still be completely left behind.
That feels like a critical insight.
It's one of the most important things this study highlights, I think. Percentages are relative, right? But the actual number of people without access is what matters for planning for health impact.
So give us an example.
Okay, take Harare, Zimbabwe. In 2017, the study found 88.6% access to sewer or septic. Sounds great, right?
Yeah, nearly 90%.
But in absolute terms, that still meant over 253,000 people in that one city were without those basic facilities.
A quarter of a million people. Wow.
Or Casablanca, Morocco, 90.5% piped water access. Still, that left nearly 400,000 people without it.
Good grief. So what does this all mean then? We can't just look at the percentages, even local ones.
Exactly. We have to look at the sheer number of people still lacking access, particularly in densely populated areas, to really grasp the scale of the challenge. Percentages alone don't tell the full story.
Okay.
And the study actually mapped these internal geographical disparities across countries. It looked at the gap between the best and worst off areas.
And what did that show over time? Did the gaps shrink?
Well, yes and no. Inequality did decrease in many places between 2000 and 2017. For improved water, that happened in about 3/4 of the countries.
Okay, that's positive.
And for improved sanitation in over half the countries. But the subnational gaps remain significant in most countries by 2017.
So even as things got better overall for many, the difference in access between communities within the same country often stay huge.
Yes, exactly. And the data revealed this played out differently in different places.
How so?
Well, in some countries, like Ethiopia for improved water, the areas starting with the lowest access actually saw the biggest improvements. So that helped narrow the gap with the better off areas.
Okay, the bottom caught up a bit.
Right. But in others, like Mozambique, again for improved water, the areas that already had the highest access improved dramatically, while the lowest access areas saw very little change. So the gap actually widened over those 17 years.
Ah, I see. So that's key for understanding how inequality persists. Sometimes it's because the bottom just isn't rising fast enough, even if the top is soaring.
Precisely. And the study specifically called out countries like Chad, Libya, and Togo as having particularly high levels of this internal inequality, especially for improved sanitation back in 2017.
Despite these persistent gaps, though, the study did find some positive movement, right? Especially for areas starting from the very, very bottom, like places with widespread open defecation.
Yes, that's a crucial positive finding. They looked specifically at administrative units where over 60% of the population practiced open defecation back in 2000.
Okay.
Out of about 1830 such areas, a really remarkable 686 had transitioned, so that by 2017, over 60% were using improved sanitation.
That's a huge shift for those communities.
It really is. And, even transitions to just unimproved facilities like a basic latrine that still represents a step up from open defecation or using surface water, it brings some benefits, even if the health gains aren't as large as with improved facilities.
And that brings us straight to the critical health connection, doesn't it? We know unsafe water and sanitation are major killers, especially for the most vulnerable.
Tragically, yes. Yeah. They remain leading risk factors for diarrheal deaths in children younger than 5.
Do we have numbers on that?
We do, from the study's analysis linked to health data. In 2017 alone, they estimated over 143,000 under 5 deaths in sub-Saharan Africa were attributable to unsafe water.
Over 143,000.
Just from water.
And over 182,000 deaths in the same age group, same region, attributed to unsafe sanitation.
Devastating numbers. It just underscores the human cost of lacking access.
Absolutely.
But on the flip side, the progress that was made, it did avert some of those deaths, presumably. It did. The study estimated that the increased access to safe water, so focusing on the better end of the scale, averted over 18,100 child deaths in sub-Saharan Africa in 2017.
Okay.
And safe sanitation averted over 10,100 deaths in the region that year. So it quantifies the life-saving impact of these interventions when they happen.
That's important. But I recall the data also showed some complexities, like progress didn't always translate directly into fewer deaths everywhere.
That's a really important nuance, yes. In some regions, other factors might have complicated the picture. Things like conflict or instability could disrupt access,
right?
Potentially even leading to decreases in the safest piped water use in some areas. The study mentioned northeastern Nigeria as an example where this might have happened.
Okay.
And it's also worth remembering the study focused primarily on the type of facility people had access to.
Not necessarily, say, the quality of the water coming out of the pipe.
Exactly. Or whether child feces were disposed of safely, which is another critical factor in diarrheal disease. So while this data gives us a huge piece of the puzzle about access, it's not the entire picture of all the factors influencing child deaths.
Understood. So stepping back, why does this ultra-detailed local-level data matters so much? For you listening, whether you're involved in global health, policy, or just concerned about these issues.
Well, because it moves us towards something people are calling precision public health.
Precision public health. Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It means instead of, say, guessing based on national averages or rolling out kind of one-size-fits-all programs,
No.
this granular data allows decision makers, aid organizations, governments to see exactly where the needs are greatest, which specific districts or communities are being left behind.
So you can target resources much more effectively.
Precisely. Target resources, tailor interventions to reach those who are furthest from access instead of spreading efforts too thinly or missing the mark.
And conversely, I suppose, you can also identify the success stories using this data.
Exactly. The study highlights specific areas, like Svepao district in Cambodia, which made huge strides in piped water access, or Bagmati zone in Nepal for sewer and septic improvements.
So you can learn from them.
Yes.
Yeah.
By identifying these exemplar communities, places that achieved significant progress, maybe even starting from a very low baseline, researchers and practitioners can study how they did it, what strategies worked there, were there specific policies, community engagement methods, and then you can ask, can those lessons be adapted and applied elsewhere in similar contexts? It provides potential models for overcoming those barriers.
Of course, even a study this comprehensive, this detailed, has limitations, right? Which the authors themselves point out.
They do, and it's important to acknowledge them. They note that their analysis relies on the definition of improved facilities. That's not quite the same as the ultimate SDG target of safely managed services.
Right. Safely managed includes more factors.
Yes, things like water quality being consistently safe, water being available when needed, and wastewater being treated. So this study is maybe a best-case scenario view based on facility type.
Okay.
There are also always data limitations with this kind of work, gaps in some areas or years. And the analysis didn't fully capture all the external factors, things like climate change impacts on water sources, conflict, or the underlying socioeconomic inequalities that often drive lack of access in the first place.
And they also stress that achieving universal access isn't a one-size-fits-all thing.
Definitely not. It will require highly tailored approaches. What works in a dense urban slum might be very different from what's needed in a remote rural area. Different geographical challenges need different solutions, and there needs to be a real focus on specifically reaching the most marginalized groups and areas.
Okay, so let's bring this deep dive back together. This study paints a picture, really, of significant overall progress in water and sanitation access across these low and middle income countries between 2000 and 2017.
Yes, millions more people gained access to improved facilities.
And that had a tangible, positive impact on child health, averting thousands of deaths. But, and it's a big but, this high-resolution data just starkly unearths these persistent, deep-seated geographical inequalities within the countries.
Progress was incredibly uneven.
Yeah. And large, absolute numbers of people, hundreds of thousands in some single cities even, remain without basic access, often concentrated in specific identifiable communities.
So what does this all mean? I think the bottom line is that while celebrating national progress is fine, achieving that goal of universal, equitable access by 2030, well, it's going to demand a much more targeted approach.
Looking beyond the averages.
Exactly. Using this kind of granular data to find the communities that are being missed, understand why they're being missed, and then deliver tailored solutions right where they're needed most. No more just painting with a broad brush.
There was one other point the study raised that struck me about the journey towards universal access. It's not always about jumping straight to the top rung of the ladder.
Right. While the biggest health gains definitely come from reaching the safest facilities, piped water, sewer, or septic connections, even moving from, say, open defecation or relying on surface water to just an unimproved facility like a simple pit latrine can offer really significant quality of life benefits.
Like saving time.
Exactly. Saving time that would otherwise be spent collecting water, often hours a day, and that's time usually taken from women and girls.
Who could be in school or earning an income instead.
Precisely. So it raises this important question, I think, for everyone working in this space. As the world focuses, quite correctly, on the highest standard of safely managed services as the ultimate goal.
Right, the SDG target.
How do we make sure that those crucial intermediate steps up the sanitation and water ladder aren't forgotten or neglected? How do we continue supporting communities to move from the absolute worst conditions, open defecation, surface water, to at least basic, even if unimproved, facilities? and then help them move onward from there.
So recognizing it's often a multi-stage process.
Yes, it's not always a single giant leap to the top for everyone everywhere all at once. We need to support progress at every step of that ladder, especially for those starting at the very bottom. It's a complex challenge, needing multiple types of solutions running in parallel.